Mmm, I really love this fluoridated water. Wait, aren't I doing a episode on fluoride? Oh, I'm Dr. Jake, and I'm going to talk to you about the fluoride myth and why you should think twice about using fluoride. I'm Dr. Jake. I'm a naturopathic medical doctor and integrative physician, and on this channel, I'll share with you how you can heal your body down to the root causes and get your energy back. Make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. Okay, let's jump in. The current mainstream belief regarding fluoride is that it's good for your teeth. We should put it in our water and we should put it in our toothpaste. And many times I'm hearing this from many dentists, the more the better, especially when you are young. So that's the mainstream belief about fluoride. So let's talk about, is there any truth to fluoride strengthening your teeth? Yes, there is. So we do need fluoride to make strong enamel in our teeth. We definitely do. The problem is, does water actually increase the strength of our teeth? That research is extremely weak. Is there research on toothpaste strengthening the enamel on our teeth? The research is gray, but there is actually pretty decent research that it does help strengthen our enamel. But we can't get too much fluoride. So when dentists say, like just recently, took my 3-year-old into a pediatric dentist, and he told my wife that my child should put the fluoride toothpaste on there and don't brush it, and just leave it there and don't spit it out and just go to sleep like that. That research is very poor and is actually going to lead to something called dental fluorosis. So I wish I was there and I wish I could actually show them the research, because obviously majority of dentists, especially pediatric dentists, aren't reading the literature, because given that type of comment is absolutely ludicrous. And we're going to talk about the toxic effects of fluoride, especially in young children. So yes, it does strengthen our teeth. But here's the thing. In the research, 1 ppm is what we put in water right now. But in the research, we need only 0.5 ppm to actually strengthen our teeth. If we go above that amount, we actually are putting too much fluoride on our teeth, and it's actually going to lead to more damage, demineralization, poor collagen growth, more porous teeth in the future. So it's a fine balance. And most of us are going to get plenty in our diet. Now, we're going to talk about what's the problem with brushing your teeth with fluoride. 2 parts per million is what it is. It's just a measurement, that scientific measurement of how much is in water. And there's several places throughout the country right now that have 4 ppm or higher. Areas that use a lot of pesticides, herbicides, areas that have a lot of metal manufacturing, especially like aluminum, or areas that have a lot of coal in that area. It goes up in the air and it deposits in our soil and gets in our water supply and makes it really high. So we don't just have fluoride in our water from us actually, it's intentionally adding it, like in the political system, we're adding it to water. We actually have it in our soils depending on where you live. And the more you have in your water, the worse health detriments occur. Let's talk about the negative effects of fluoride. So this is going to be really detailed, and it might be more than you guys really want, but I really want to dive into what fluoride is actually doing, okay? It is a slow toxin. So it was known as a poison for a very long time. It was first developed and actually found in the early 1500s, but actually isolated in like the early 1800s. Some of it was done in the late 1700s. And the scientists that actually were working with fluoride were either getting very ill or actually dying from the toxic gas that was coming off, called the devil's poison back in that time. So it's very interesting that we actually see it as a health thing now, when back in the day, it was like, hey, stay away from the fluoride, because this is the devil's poison, because it kills and maims secretly without exception. So it's a very slow killer. So let's talk about what it's actually doing on the body. Let's first start with, so how our body makes energy, or ATP, is through our mitochondria. And fluoride goes and messes with an enzyme called ATPase. That is an enzyme that makes ATP. ATP is what every cell in our body uses for energy. Our brain, our heart, our gastrointestinal tract, all the endocrine organs, every tiny little thing. So we don't want to mess with the mitochondria, and fluoride does that. It damages our mitochondria in small amounts over time. Will continue to damage our mitochondria and can lead to long-term effects in the future. For example, it messes with our thyroid. And main reason why it messes with our thyroid is it affects iodine coming into our thyroid. So when we look at the periodic table, let's go back to our chemistry days. Looking at the periodic table, we have things called halogens. That is where fluoride, chlorine, iodine, and bromine, they're all in that category. And all these substances interact with each other. But the only one that actually is good for our body in that category is iodine. And the most reactive, or the one that has the highest amount of reactive oxygen species, is fluoride. And I'm sure many of you watching this are actually thinking reactive oxygen species. Wait, that's what's good about antioxidants. That's what helps with that. Yeah. So when we're getting fluoride in our body, it's the strongest reactive oxidant in our bodies. So we don't want that. And then it's going to interfere with the iodine production, not allow iodine get into our thyroid. And our thyroid is, there's some people call it the mood regulator. It actually affects our mood, depression, anxiety, sleep cycles, and it affects our energy, our well-being, our metabolism, our weight loss, all kinds of things. Our mitochondria doesn't work right if we don't have our thyroid. So fluoride's already messing with our mitochondria, and then it's affecting our thyroid. Man, of course, why are we so tired all the time? Why are we can't think as well? Why do we have brain fog? So many of us are just not functioning like we want. And a piece of that is definitely related to fluoride. Now let's dive into what's really interesting in the research is, and this is interesting to me because I see this in laboratory work sometimes, is there's an elevated PTH. There are these little glands on the back of our thyroid gland. So many times when you see an elevated PTH, you're like, okay, that means that there is a tumor back there. But what I've seen is I see an elevated PTH, but they don't necessarily have a tumor there, but they have high calcium and they have an elevated PTH. What could be causing that? And when I started researching it was mind blowing to me that it could definitely be related to fluoride toxicity. Because when we look into the research, people that have higher amounts of fluoride in their body, they have higher amounts of PTH. PTH is a regulator of how our bone is made. And if we make too much parathyroid hormone, it's going to break down our bone and it's going to release calcium in our body. And probably many of you listening to this is, wait, calcification, there's calcification of arteries, tendons. That's not good stuff. So yeah, if you have way too high of calcium, it's going to lead to chronic disease. So what we see in the research, the higher the PTH, no matter if you have high calcium or not, just looking at elevated PTH, there's increased risks of congestive heart failure, increases of the left ventricle get enlarged. And congestive heart failure is when your heart's not able to pump right. It's too big and flabby. It's not able to pump the blood and oxygen that isn't able to get throughout your body effectively when that happens. Also, many of us, we have 6% of the country, maybe even higher now, have diabetes, and even greater amounts have prediabetes or decreased insulin sensitivity. And fluoride, elevated PTH, has shown to affect insulin production from our beta cells in our pancreas and also affect insulin sensitivity of our cells. And then this is going to lead to, guess what? Osteoporosis. So as you can see, just because of elevated PTH, this is leading to some of the most common chronic illnesses that we have that cause death today. Is fluoride a big cause of death in our country? I definitely think it is. I don't think it's the only thing. There's a lot of things that are going into play, but chronic fluoride toxicity that we're getting in our water supply and in our toothpaste, in our air, is definitely a big piece of really the chronic diseases that we're seeing in the elderly. What can we do to get fluoride out of our body? One big thing, remember what I said about iodine. You want to make sure you get enough iodine in our bodies because that is one way that we are able to displace the attachment of fluoride on our cells because they are in the same elemental in the periodic table and they interfere with each other. So if we get sufficient amount of iodine in our body, and you need to get this checked by a doctor that knows what they're doing, that actually is checking your urine appropriately and doing a provocative urine iodine test that's actually looking at how much iodine is eliminated over a 24-hour period, because that actually tells us how much we are depositing in our body. Okay. So if you have sufficient amount of iodine, you're going to pee out at least 95%. If you don't, you're going to pee out less than 95%. So this is the best way, not just a blood test or just a one test random urine of iodine. That doesn't really get us appropriately. We want to actually see how is it being eliminated in our body. So that's one big way to do that. Obviously, we want to decrease how much fluoride we get in our bodies. We could do that by not having the fluoridated toothpaste, by not having fluoridated water, filtering our water. So we get in our water a lot. We do get it in the air supply. That's a problem, but we could get air filters in our home. Most of the time we're spending time in there. We get air filters in our car. These are ways that we can get away from it and actually start going out in areas that are out in the wilderness that are away from chemical plants or metal manufacturing, etc. So getting a good water purifier that actually filters fluoride. You got to get a good one. Most water filters don't. You have to ask specifically, does it filter fluoride? Reverse osmosis, a good one, does filter fluoride. So you want to make sure you do that. And then you want to get a good air purifier because it is in our air. So it will help eliminate that. And then you don't want to be putting fluoridated toothpaste, especially in adults. It makes no sense to use fluoride as an adult. That's ludicrous because we use it to strengthen the crown of the enamel when we're forming teeth. So that is important for kiddos, which I still don't recommend fluoride in kiddos, except if you're doing it appropriately. But if you're after like 6 or 7 years old, there's no reason to do it. So why toxify yourself with fluoridated toothpaste? So those are some things regarding that. But I wanted to talk about some of the other toxicities that come along with fluoride, because I left out some big ones. And the biggest one of it all is how it affects our brain. It will toxify our brain and decrease our brain's function and how it makes its appropriate amino acids. So it can lead to not making the right amount of serotonin or dopamine. So it can affect our depression or our anxiety. It also calcifies our pineal gland. Probably have never heard of the pineal gland. What is that guy? That is what makes melatonin. So very interesting. Other concept is when people get older, they don't sleep well, right? So that's probably related to calcification of the pineal gland. And we do this in MRIs. We see that the more elderly you are, there's more calcification of the pineal gland. But there's been research on people that are in highly fluoridated areas. And also they've done experiments on animals that they've given fluoride, and they see the higher amount of fluoride, the more calcification that occurs to the brain, and especially the pineal gland that is our main producer of serotonin and melatonin. So one piece of why we're not sleeping well could be related to fluoride toxicity, but also melatonin is a very strong antioxidant and also boosts our immune system and actually keeps our thymus gland actually functioning when we're older. So melatonin is not just sleep. It's to actually decrease the oxidative effects happening in our bodies, which leads to chronic disease and actually boosts our immune system, but then it also helps us sleep. So it's not one big thing just to mess with our melatonin and our serotonin productions throughout our bodies. It messes with the myelin sheaths, how they send signals throughout our body. Could be related to some of the chronic illnesses like multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease. So that's just a quick rundown of how fluoride can really affect our health. So it's not just one small issue. It's really the devil's poison, the slow killer. We don't notice it immediately when we get it in small amounts, 1 ppm or in our toothpaste, but it accumulates. It's like we don't love lead. We don't love mercury. These things accumulate in our tissues, like in our brain and our muscles and our bones. And fluoride does the same thing. And it accumulates and causes all kinds of health detriments in the future. So I touched on this a little bit before, but really the big thing is start taking iodine and make sure you have appropriate amount of iodine in your body, because that will displace the deposits of fluoride and put it out in the bloodstream. And then you want to be sweating it out. So you want to be doing saunas, and then you want to do binders. So you want to do activated charcoal or chlorella to bind up these toxins that are coming out through our gut. And then you want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water and making sure you're getting enough salt, because that's how we're going to detoxify it properly. So does fluoride help with mineralization? Yes, at low doses, at 0.5 ppm. But in the fluoridated water, that is 1 ppm. Oh, let's talk about actually in our toothpaste, 1,000 to 1,500 is in our toothpaste. So those doses actually are detrimental to teeth and actually causes demineralization of bone, makes the enamel more porous, messes with the protein collagen synthesis that is happening in the teeth, and will lead to it becoming weaker, more brittle, breaking down, more possibility for cavities, but also just breaking your teeth. You know, as you get more elderly, your teeth start to break down or wear down, or you start chipping. And if you get too much fluoride, it's going to make things worse. So I'm not saying we don't need fluoride. Fluoride is something we do need in very small amounts, but we get that in our soil. when we eat food. We do get fluoride in our soil. So why are we going to put it on our toothpaste or put it in our water when we already have some in our soil? And if you do like a mineralized salt that I'm a huge fan of, that has a little bit of fluoride, very small amounts that we actually need to make healthy bone and actually affect our bone appropriately. But one thing I left out too is at least osteoporosis, right, breaks down our teeth, not just because of elevated PTH, but also because it just causes demineralization of the bone when it's too high and there's breakdown and it doesn't work appropriately. So please just don't use it when you're older. And I don't recommend it in children. Here's the big problem with children. There's been research on it. If you're 6 years and younger, you swallow most of your toothpaste. So you're not getting it out. They put it on their teeth. They might swish it out a little bit, but most of that toothpaste they're swallowing. And they're getting 1,500 ppm possibly from toothpaste, way more than coming from the water supply, right? So it's a major toxifying agent that happens there when we're putting in our teeth. So I'm not a fan of using it on children, even though there's research that it possibly could be beneficial. It causes more harm to good, in my opinion. How did we actually go to a place that fluoride is a poison to, hey, let's put fluoride in our water? There's a lot of different theories on this of why this really happened. I think it might be outside theory based on actually looking at what actually happened and looking at what were the detriments politically and financially that was going along with this. So main reason I think this was really done is, okay, we have manufacturing, we have pesticides, we have herbicides, we have metal, aluminum. What are we going to do with all this fluoride? It's toxic. It's going to be a liability in the future because we know it's toxic. We can't put it in the soil. We can't store it anywhere. So what are we going to do with it? They have no idea. So I think they came up with the idea, hey, let's put on a campaign and let's start saying that it's actually good for your health and good for your teeth, because there is some research to say fluoride is good for making strengthen your enamel. So let's put it in the water supply. Let's put it in toothpaste and actually make a toxic substance that we don't know what to do with it. Let's make it a healthy substance so we don't have any liability issues in the future. This might sound morbid, but I don't have no other idea why they would do such a thing that they did here based on the research, looking at the history of it. And this was something that they were concerned about back at that time. And around that time is when we started actually using fluoride in our water. It started in Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1945. And that's when a lot of this issues with fluoride and where we're going to put it were starting shortly after World War II. That might be the reason. There's other nefarious means, I think, out there when I look into it, possibly related to this, maybe making us dumber, etc. There's a great book where it really dives into the research, has hundreds and hundreds of research articles on fluoride, how it affects your body, on the history of fluoride, etc. It's The Devil's Poison by Dr. Murphy. So if you find this really interesting, you should check out his book and really dive into the research and become informed. If you want to find out if your water is fluoridated or not, you could just Google it. You could search the specific city and just type in your city and do they use fluoride in your city. Many times it is county based, so you have to search the county. Sometimes it's city based. So you got to search the county. If your county has it, most likely your city has it. But sometimes certain cities are like, oh, no, we're not going to do it, even though the county does it. So you could look into that. I know here in the state of Utah, Salt Lake County uses fluoride. I believe Davis County does. Don't hold me to that, but I know Salt Lake County does, and Utah County doesn't use fluoride in their water. Yeah, you can get a hold of us by visiting our website, www.integrativemedica.com. Find our number there. Give my receptionist a call. You can set up an appointment with me or some of my other great doctors. We also have a link up there that you can set up your appointment directly on the website. If you want to learn more about fluoride or other toxic substances, click my videos to the right. I'm Dr. Jake, and I'll see you there.